Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I was sitting in my tiny apartment, halfway through a late-night movie, when the emergency alert blared through my television. The piercing tone rattled my nerves, and as the screen switched to a bright red warning, I knew something was very wrong. Emergency alert, biohazard incident, shelter in place, avoid contact with infected individuals. My heart pounded. I grabbed my phone, flipping through news apps, but everything was lagging. Slow, like the entire city was trying to do the same thing at once. I switched to social media. Frantic posts flooded my screen. People screaming, streets filled with chaos, reports of attacks. I peered out my window. Sirens wailed in the distance. Helicopters thundered overhead, searchlights cutting through the darkness. The streets below were eerily empty, except for a few figures moving awkwardly, staggering under flickering streetlights. I reached for my landline. Something about cell service felt unreliable tonight. I dialed my sister's number. No answer. I tried again, straight to voicemail. Then, another alert. Raccoon City under lockdown. Stay indoors. Do not engage. A chill ran down my spine. My gut told me I had to act fast. I rushed to the kitchen, pulling open drawers, searching for anything useful. A flashlight, batteries, canned food. I needed to be prepared. Then, movement outside caught my eye. A man stood in the middle of the street, twitching, his head jerking at odd angles. Another figure lurched toward him. At first, I thought they knew each other, until the second figure lunged, sinking its teeth into the man's shoulder. The scream that followed chilled me to the core. My breath hitched as the man collapsed, writhing. The attacker, if you could even call it that, kept going, clawing at him with unnatural speed. This wasn't normal. I stumbled backward, my mind struggling to process what I had just seen. That's when I heard it. A scratching at my door. Something was outside, and it wanted in. The scratching at my door was slow at first, like someone testing the surface, figuring out what was between them and me. Then, it became more frantic. I backed away, my pulse hammering in my ears. My apartment wasn't exactly fortified, just a flimsy deadbolt and a cheap chain lock. I didn't have a weapon, not even a baseball bat. Holding my breath, I crept toward the door and peered through the peephole. A woman stood in the hallway. Her clothes were torn, her head tilted at an unnatural angle. Her fingers raked against the wood, leaving faint streaks behind. Her breathing was ragged, wheezing. "Ma'am?" My voice was barely above a whisper. "Are you okay?" The scratching stopped. Slowly, she turned her head toward the peephole. I sucked in a sharp breath. Her eyes were clouded, her pupils barely visible. Her mouth hung open slightly, lips stained dark. Then she slammed into the door. I stumbled back. The impact rattled the frame, another slam, and another. She wasn't asking for help, she was trying to get in. I moved fast, grabbing my couch and shoving it against the door. My hands were shaking as I wedged a chair beneath the handle. It wasn't much, but it was all I had. The pounding continued, harder, faster. Then another sound, more footsteps echoing down the hall. I risked another glance through the peephole. 2 more people staggered into view. A man and a teenager, their clothes shredded, their movements jerky and disjointed. The woman at my door turned her head toward them, sniffing the air like some kind of animal. Without warning, the man lunged at the teenager. He bit down, tearing into his shoulder. The scream that followed was unlike anything I had ever heard, high-pitched, raw, filled with agony. The teenager crumpled, writhing on the ground. His hands clawed at the floor, fingers twitching. Then he stopped. The hallway went quiet. For a second, I thought he was gone, but then he moved, not like a person in pain, like something waking up. Slowly, he lifted his head. His mouth opened wide, but no words came out. His body twisted unnaturally as he pushed himself to his feet. And then, just like the others, he started sniffing the air. I backed away from the door, my breath shallow. This wasn't just some illness. This was something else entirely. And it was spreading. The hallway outside my apartment was deathly silent. The teenager, if he could still be called that, swayed on his feet, his head jerking as if adjusting to his new existence. The other two creatures watched him, their cloudy eyes filled with something primal. Then, without warning, the boy turned toward my door. I backed away. Did he hear me? Smell me? A low groan rattled from his throat. Then, as if answering some unspoken command, all three figures lunged. The doorframe shuddered under the impact. I scrambled to my bedroom, dragging my nightstand in front of the door as an extra barricade. My brain raced for options. There was no way I could wait this out. Another emergency alert buzzed on my phone. Government order. All citizens must evacuate to designated shelters immediately. Infected individuals are extremely hostile. Do not engage. Evacuation? In this chaos? I peeked out my window. Fires burned in the distance, plumes of smoke curling into the sky. Flashing lights flickered at intersections, but no sirens followed. Cars were abandoned in the streets. A helicopter roared overhead, its spotlight scanning the city like it was searching for survivors. I couldn't stay here. The pounding at my door grew more violent. I had minutes at best before they got through. My fire escape. I rushed to the window and unlatched it, wincing at the screech of metal. Cold night air hit my face as I climbed onto the narrow platform. I looked down, 4 floors to the ground. Not ideal, but better than becoming whatever was on the other side of that door. As I swung a leg over the railing, a scream split the air from the street below. I froze. A woman was running, sprinting down the road. Behind her, at least a dozen figures chased after her, their bodies jerking unnaturally, their limbs flailing with terrifying speed. She wasn't going to make it. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. She tripped, fell hard. One of them pounced, dragging her back as she clawed at the pavement. Her screams turned to wet, gurgling gasps. The others swarmed. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. Raccoon City was gone. And if I didn't move now, I would be too. I forced myself to move. Dwelling on what I had just seen wouldn't help me survive. The fire escape creaked beneath my weight as I climbed down, every muscle tense. The creatures inside my apartment were still slamming against the door, but the sound was fading behind me. I reached the second-floor landing and hesitated. The final drop was too far to jump safely. My eyes darted around for another route. Then I spotted the dumpster below. It was a rough landing, but better than a broken ankle. I took a deep breath, swung my legs over the railing, and let go. The impact rattled through my body. The stench was unbearable, but I scrambled out as fast as I could. Staying still wasn't an option. The street was chaos. Fires raged in the distance. Car alarms wailed. Bodies, some moving, some not, were scattered across the pavement. A city that had once been alive with the hum of traffic and conversation was now filled with something far worse. I crouched behind an abandoned car, scanning my surroundings. The evacuation shelters. That was my best bet. But where? I needed a map, or better yet, a police station. If anyone still had control over this city, it would be them. A rustling sound snapped me out of my thoughts. I turned my head slowly. A man stood a few feet away facing a shop window. His back was to me, his body swaying. I held my breath. Then I saw his reflection in the glass. His mouth hung open, his skin pale and stretched tight. His eyes empty. One of them. I inched backward, keeping my movements slow, quiet. One wrong step, one noise, and my foot hit a loose can. The clatter echoed through the street. The creature froze. Then, it turned. I barely had time to react before it lunged. The creature lunged so fast that my body barely had time to react. I threw myself backward, scrambling away as its fingers swiped at the air where I had just been. Its cloudy eyes locked onto me, its mouth twisting into something between a snarl and a moan. Then it charged. I turned and ran. My heart pounded as I weaved between abandoned cars, my boots slamming against the pavement. Behind me, the creature's footsteps were erratic but fast. Too fast. I took a sharp turn down an alley, nearly slipping on something wet. Garbage bags were ripped open, their contents spilled across the ground. A broken fire escape ladder dangled just a few feet too high. No way up, no way out. I spun around just as the creature reached the alley's entrance. Its head jerked from side to side, sniffing the air. Its chest heaved like it was breathing me in. I took a slow step backward, my mind racing for options. There was a dumpster to my left, but it was too low to climb. A door on the right, but I had no idea if it was unlocked. Then something shifted behind the creature. Another figure staggered into view. Then another. My stomach dropped. The noise of my chase had drawn more of them. I backed up again, reaching for the doorknob. Please be open. The creature at the alley's entrance let out a rattling breath, and then it snapped its head toward me. It lunged. I twisted the knob and shoved. The door flew open and I stumbled inside, slamming it shut just as something heavy slammed into the other side. I braced against the wood, my breath coming in short gasps. The pounding started immediately, fists hammering against the door. I scanned the darkened room. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with cleaning supplies and canned goods. A small security desk sat in the corner, a single monitor flickering weakly. A storage room, a back office. Then I saw it. The exit sign glowing faintly on the far wall. I didn't hesitate. I sprinted toward the door, threw it open, and ran. I had to find shelter, somewhere safer than this. Somewhere that wasn't already overrun. I burst through the back exit and into another alley, my breath ragged. The pounding on the door behind me didn't stop. They knew I was in here. I needed to keep moving. The alley was narrow, lined with the dumpsters and abandoned crates. A flickering street lamp at the far end cast long shadows, making every dark corner feel like a threat. I pressed myself against the wall, scanning the street ahead. More figures lurched in the distance, their movements unnatural. They were everywhere now. The city was theirs. A sudden shout cut through the air. I tensed. Someone was alive. The sound came from my left, a small convenience store with shattered windows. Inside, a man was struggling against one of the creatures. He held a metal pipe, swinging wildly, but he was losing ground. I hesitated. Helping him meant risking my own life. Another growl from behind me made the choice for me. I ran toward the store. As I climbed through the broken window, glass crunched beneath my boots. The man didn't even notice me at first. He was too busy fending off the creature. His swings were getting weaker. I grabbed a can from a nearby shelf and hurled it. It smacked against the creature's head with a dull thud. It barely reacted, but the distraction was enough. The man used the moment to swing the pipe again, cracking it against the creature's skull. It collapsed. He staggered backward, chest heaving, eyes wide with panic. "You," he swallowed hard, "you're not one of them." "Not yet," I muttered, glancing toward the door. More of them were outside. "We can't stay here," he said, gripping the pipe tighter. "They heard the fight." I nodded. We had to move. "Police station," I said. "Might still be secure." His jaw tightened. "Then let's go before we're trapped." Neither of us knew if the police station would actually be safe. But it was the only chance we had left. The man, he told me his name was Eric, moved fast despite exhaustion setting in. We didn't talk much. There wasn't time for introductions. And honestly, neither of us wanted to waste energy on anything but survival. We stuck to the shadows, avoiding the main roads where the infected swarmed. The deeper we went into the city, the worse it got. Storefronts were smashed, cars overturned, bodies littered the streets, some torn apart, some twitching like they were still trying to get up. The police station loomed ahead, its massive structure standing tall in the chaos. The front entrance was barricaded, makeshift defenses of overturned desks and riot shields. And beyond the barriers, movement. Survivors. Eric grabbed my arm. "They're still here." It was the first hope I'd felt all night. We sprinted across the street. I expected gunfire, a warning shot, anything to stop us from getting too close. Instead, a voice called out, "Hurry!" A flashlight beam cut through the dark. A figure waved from the barricade. We didn't hesitate. Eric reached the blockade first. Scrambling over it, his hands pulled him up. I followed, heart pounding as I climbed over the rough debris. The moment my feet hit the ground inside, the barricade shifted. The infected had noticed. They slammed against the barriers, moaning and snarling. I turned to see who had saved us. A police officer, his uniform stained with dirt and sweat, lowered his flashlight. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes were sharp. "You're lucky," he muttered. "Few people make it this far." More survivors huddled inside, some civilians, some officers. Their faces were tight with fear. "Is it safe here?" Eric asked. The officer hesitated. For now. That hesitation told me everything. This place wouldn't hold forever. And when it fell, there would be nowhere left to run. The officer led us deeper into the station, past sandbag barricades and overturned desks that had been hastily arranged as defenses. The air was thick with tension. People whispered in hushed voices, some tending to wounds, others staring blankly at the floor. Eric and I exchanged a look. This wasn't a shelter. It was a waiting room for the inevitable. The officer, his name was Carter, stopped near a cluster of survivors. "We don't have much, but it's safer here than out there." "How long can this place hold?" I asked. Carter exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "Depends on how fast we run out of supplies. The power's flickering. Half the station's already compromised and—" A crash interrupted him. It came from the far side of the building. Every head snapped toward the hallway. Then came the screaming. Carter's radio crackled, West Wing's breached. Gunfire erupted. More screams followed. The station wasn't safe anymore. Eric grabbed my arm. "We need to go, now." Survivors scattered, some running for the exits, others scrambling for weapons. Carter barked orders, but panic had already taken hold. Another crash, closer this time. The barricade at the main entrance groaned under pressure. We bolted. Down a side corridor, through an office filled with overturned filing cabinets. The emergency exit was ahead, a metal door with a red exit sign flickering weakly. Then a deafening bang. The barricade collapsed. A wave of them poured in, their moans turning into frenzied howls. Eric yanked the door open, and we stumbled into the alley behind the station. We didn't stop running, not when the screams echoed behind us, not when the city stretched before us, filled with fire and horror. Raccoon City was gone, and if we wanted to live, we had to keep moving. Because the outbreak wasn't over. It was just beginning. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.